The caning of Charles Sumner demonstrated the failure of diplomacy to resolve the issue of slavery expanding throughout the U.S., resulting in violent debate that would eventually bring about the Civil War. In the mid-1850s, the United States attempted to approach this issue of slavery diplomatically. They did this through the Kansas-Nebraska Act in May of 1854, which allowed each state to determine its own rules regarding the practice. Unfortunately, this led to violent episodes between pro-slavery and abolition forces, in which in many instances came to Nebraska and Kansas from other states. Bleeding Kansas was an outcome from the Kansas-Nebraska Act, where there were many outbreaks of violent guerrilla warfare, where about 55 people were killed. The Kansas-Nebraska Act was a way for the U.S. government to settle the issue diplomatically, but it had the unintended effect of creating more debate within the Union. Due to the failure of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, many Northern senators disapproved of the brutality, one of which was Senator of Massachusetts, Charles Sumner. Massachusetts Senator Charles Sumner was an abolitionist politician who had served in Congress for 5 years. He was 6'4", and while other senators would wear black frock coats, he wore light-colored tweed coats with lavender pants. This all matched his strong and outspoken demeanor. He also ran for president in 1848, but did not win. Now that you know a little bit more about Sumner, let's move on to his reaction of the outbreak of Bleeding Kansas. Sumner got the news of the brutality happening in Bleeding Kansas. He wrote a speech that was 112 pages. On the surface, this might seem like an act of diplomacy, but it would lead to a violent debate within the Union. It has taken me over 2 months to schedule this time to speak on the floor. This speech must be perfect, or all that time was spent for nothing. I can leave no doubt that the culprits of this crime against Kansas was South Carolina Senator Andrew Pickens Butler and Illinois Senator Stephen Arnold Douglas, the noisome squat that he is. Mr. President, you are now called to redress a great transgression. Seldom in the history of our nations has such question been presented. It belongs to me now, in the first place, to expose the crime against Kansas and its origin and extent. Once Sumner finished writing the speech, he was ready to address the problem. It was May 19, 1856. The temperature was 90 degrees, and the old Senate chamber was packed with more people than usual. Mr. President, you are now called to redress a great transgression. Seldom in the history of our nation has such a question been presented. It belongs to me now, in the first place, to expose the crime against Kansas in its origin and extent. Due to the speech lasting the span of 5 hours over 2 days, Sumner went about many things. But it would get interesting when Sumner started to call out other politicians. Now, Stephen Douglas, you, sir, are a brutal, vulgar man, without delicacy or scholarship, who looks you need to clean the linen and should be put under a shower bath. You, sir, are a noisome squat and a nameless animal. You, sir, are not fit to be a U.S. Senator. Now I must move on, for I shall not hinder Douglas any longer. But you know how I will move on to? South Carolina Senator Andrew Butler. He might not be here today, but there's still so much to say. First of all, he cannot open his mouth, but out flies a blunder. Andrew Pickens Butler has read many books of chivalry and believes himself a chivalrous knight. Of course, he has chosen a mistress to whom he has made his vows, and who, though ugly to others, is always lovely to him, though polluted in the sight of the world, is chaste in his sight. I mean, the harlot, slavery. Sumner's speech was very controversial between the Senate and the chamber that day. Word of the speech spread quickly, as many copies of the speech were sent out to people around the country. That was when South Carolina Representative Preston Smith Brooks found out about the horrible things Sumner had stated about his second cousin, Andrew Butler. This is nonsense. He dares make such statements about a member of my own family. How dare he go so low even to make a mockery of his speech impediment? I cannot allow this imbecile to get away with such crimes as this. But how? I simply can't duel him. He's not a gentleman like myself. I got it. I will walk into the chamber right up to his desk. I will state, Mr. Sumner, I have read your speech twice over carefully. It's a libel against my relative and my state. Then I'll grip my good approach cane, and I'll beat him. I'll beat him until either he drops dead or I. Brooks then went on to recruit his friends, fellow South Carolinian Lawrence Key and Virginian Henry Edmondson. Only 2 days after the Sumner recited his speech, on May 22nd, 1856, Brooks and his acquaintances walked into the echoey chamber to see Sumner sitting at his desk, franking copies of his crime against Kansas speech. Not too many people were present in the chamber that day, so Brooks knew it was the perfect time to attack. Brooks walked down the aisle, cane gripped in hand. But there was one issue. There was a lady present in the chamber at the time. So, ever the gentleman, Brooks took a seat and waited for the lady to leave. When she did, Brooks walked down the aisle once again, walked directly in front of Sumner's desk, and stated, Mr. Sumner, I have read your speech twice over carefully. It's a libel against my relative and my state. Sumner slowly started to rise from his desk when Brooks struck Sumner with a fiery passion. As Brooks struck him, Sumner yelled, "Oh Lord!" Due to how echoey the chamber was, you could hear each hit through the whole room. Few people tried helping Sumner escape their brutality, but they were stopped by Lawrence Key, who had pistol in hand, and exclaimed, "Let them be." Sumner, bleeding profusely, was blinded by how much blood was in his face. Sumner's desk was bolted to the floor, so he stuck under his desk, forced to take the beating, hit after hit. But Sumner had struggled so much, he ripped the desk off the floor so he could get away as far as he could. But it was too late. The scars had already set. It wasn't until the cane was shattered into pieces that Brooks stopped beating Sumner. Once Brooks stopped, he just casually walked out of the establishment. That day in the chamber, Sumner had taken 25 to 30 strikes straight to the head, with no one to help him. Some stated the injuries were so bad that you could see Sumner's skull through how deep the gash was. Ironically, this event that occurred that evening made both men heroes for their respective factions. Because both men were made heroes, each side became more entrenched in its position, hindering diplomacy. Once Brooks returned to South Carolina, he received many canes as a thank you for making that statement. One of the canes he received said, "Hit him again," inscribed on the cane. Many northern politicians tried to impeach Brooks, but it did not make the 2/3 votes it needed to pass. As for Sumner, he was badly injured, and though re-elected later in 1856, he was not present in the chamber for 3 years due to how bad his injuries were. His empty chair in the Senate was a sort of defiant symbol from the North to the South. Many Southern senators called Sumner a coward for not being present in the chamber and resuming his duties. Sumner had also suffered from PTSD, getting nightmares, and severe headaches. Southerners may have believed they triumphed over the North from this incident, but it fueled the flame of the up-and-coming Civil War. This event in history was neither debate nor diplomacy, due to how these men resolved conflict. From how Sumner verbally assaulted politicians who were just trying to resolve the conflict of slavery, to how Brooks physically assaulted a man for a wrongdoing against a distant relative. The caning of Charles Sumner demonstrates the failure of diplomacy to resolve the debate of slavery expanding throughout the U.S. This incident may seem like a random, interesting story, but it shows what happens to our society when our institutions fail to act diplomatically and debate civilly. In the elections of 2016 and 2020, we witnessed similar factions go head-to-head, and they valued their positions over the progress of our country as a whole. The caning of Charles Sumner shows us how dangerous political issues can be when debate and diplomacy are abandoned for violence and extremism.